Larry Fine because I knew they were still alive, and the operator said, well, we have several M. Howards, but only one Larry Fine.
For decades, fans of classic comedy and film historians alike have been mystified by one lingering enigma: the abrupt and irreversible decline of Jerome "Curly" Howard, the beloved slapstick genius of the Three Stooges. His vibrant energy, distinctive voice, and unique brand of physical comedy had etched him into the hearts of millions. Yet, seemingly overnight, the exuberant dynamo who had bounced across screens with wild yelps and exaggerated pratfalls began to falter. His timing dulled, his movement slowed, and by the mid-1940s, he was no longer the Curly the world remembered. For years, explanations ranged from vague health issues to overwork, but no concrete understanding ever emerged to fully explain the rapid deterioration of one of comedy's brightest stars. Until now. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. Recently unearthed documents and long-lost medical records, coupled with new forensic analysis from a dedicated group of archivists and medical experts, have finally brought the full, shocking truth to light. What they discovered not only reshaped the understanding of Curly's decline, but revealed a deeply unsettling series of events that had been concealed for nearly 80 years. The truth was far more complex than fans and scholars had imagined, involving misdiagnoses, hidden interventions, and a pattern of abuse, both physical and pharmaceutical, that underpinned the collapse of a man once hailed as the heartbeat of American comedy. The root of the mystery begins during the early 1940s, at the height of the Three Stooges' popularity. While Larry and Moe maintained a steady, manageable rhythm within the group's physically demanding routines, Curly often took the brunt of the slapstick intensity. What audiences didn't see was that many of the gags involved real impacts and risks. Real falls, real punches, and real injuries. Curly's unyielding commitment to the bit led him to downplay or ignore numerous signs of wear and tear. Behind the scenes, he was often bruised, battered, and increasingly exhausted. But pride, fear of replacement, and a lack of understanding about long-term trauma kept him pushing forward. The recently uncovered files include a series of confidential studio memos and insurance assessments from Columbia Pictures. These documents paint a stark picture of how the studio viewed Curly not as a human being with growing vulnerabilities, but as a fragile asset in need of constant performance maintenance. According to the internal notes, executives were aware of his declining energy and suspected underlying health issues. However, rather than reduce his workload or provide medical leave, they quietly arranged for a regimen of stimulants to be administered under the guise of vitamin injections. These drugs, potent amphetamines available without regulation during that time, were intended to jolt him into performance readiness without addressing the root of his fatigue or pain. Further medical analyses conducted in recent years on recovered tissue samples, preserved unknowingly by a pathologist's estate, have confirmed the long-term effects of these substances on Curly's cardiovascular and neurological systems. The deterioration of his motor skills, slurred speech, and unpredictable behavior, long believed to be the effects of strokes or alcohol abuse, now appear to have been directly exacerbated by this forced medication strategy. The studio's actions, while likely framed internally as pragmatic, had devastating consequences. The tragedy deepens when considering the full extent of what Curly endured in silence. Alongside the forced stimulants, records show a pattern of untreated concussions resulting from on-set accidents during scenes where safety measures were practically non-existent. Falls from ladders, slaps to the head with real tools, and repeated hits to the same parts of the body were common occurrences. What passed for comedy gold to audiences was, in reality, a sequence of physical traumas compounding over time. The slow erosion of Curly's health was not just the result of bad luck or genetics. It was a systematic breakdown, accelerated by the pressures and negligence of the very system that profited from his genius. One of the most haunting revelations in the files is a string of private correspondence between a concerned assistant director and the studio's top brass. In a memo dated August 1944, the assistant pleads for medical intervention, noting that Curly had collapsed twice during a shoot and had been unable to remember lines that he had rehearsed only minutes before. The response? A cold directive to cut around him and increase Moe's screen time in future scripts. There was no offer of help, no suggestion of rest. The momentum of the Stooges machine was too valuable to interrupt for the well-being of one performer, no matter how integral he had been to its success. Perhaps the most heart-wrenching element of the mystery's resolution lies in what Curly himself may have understood. Among the unearthed items was a handwritten journal, kept sporadically over several years. In fragmented entries, Curly voices confusion and frustration over his failing faculties. He writes of waking up not remembering where he was or what day it was, and of looking into the mirror only to find someone he no longer recognized. There is no self-pity in these passages, only a quiet, tragic confusion from a man who felt he was slipping away and didn't know why. All of this culminated in 1946, when Curly suffered a massive stroke on set and was forced into early retirement from the group. At the time, the official explanation remained vague, clouded in references to poor health and exhaustion. But now, with the benefit of hindsight and a clearer understanding of the systematic pressures he endured, the stroke seems less like a random health event and more like the inevitable endpoint of years of mistreatment. This new understanding of what happened to Curly Howard rewrites not only the story of his life, but also casts a longer shadow over the golden age of slapstick. The prevailing image of the carefree, joyful clown bouncing back from every slap and fall now takes on a darker tone. It prompts deeper questions about the price of entertainment, especially in an era when workplace protections, mental health awareness, and medical ethics were practically non-existent. Curly wasn't just a victim of his own health. He was a victim of a system that mined his body and spirit for laughter, with little thought for what it would leave behind. The shock of this revelation reverberates beyond fan circles and into broader cultural discussions about celebrity, labor, and legacy. Curly's story becomes emblematic of a time when stars were expected to be invincible, when vulnerability was equated with weakness, and when powerful studios could exploit talent without accountability. The fact that such a vibrant performer was so deeply broken without the public ever truly knowing is a sobering reminder of the hidden costs behind the glamour and comedy of Hollywood's golden era. For those who have adored the Three Stooges for generations, the news may feel like a betrayal, not by Curly but by the very forces that claim to support and showcase him. The discovery also brings with it a profound sense of loss. Not just for what Curly endured, but for the performances that might have been, the longevity he might have enjoyed, and the life he could have led had he been granted the care, rest, and respect he deserved. There is also a newfound appreciation for the resilience Curly exhibited even in the face of such adversity. To think that many of his most iconic performances were delivered while under the influence of powerful stimulants, while enduring undiagnosed brain trauma, or while battling cognitive decline, reframes those scenes as quiet acts of defiance and incredible will. Every fall, every woo-woo-woo and nyuk-nyuk-nyuk was not just a comedic flourish. It was a moment of courage and effort, performed against the odds. This fresh clarity also invites reflection on the way stories are told and preserved. For decades, biographers and fans speculated endlessly about Curly's fate, piecing together clues from interviews, old photographs, and inconsistent testimonies. But the true narrative was locked away, deliberately obscured by institutional interests and buried in forgotten file drawers. Only now, through persistence, technological advancement, and a bit of luck, has the full picture come into view. It underscores how easily truth can be hidden when powerful forces have a vested interest in shaping a different story. More than a historical curiosity, the unveiling of the Curly Howard mystery is a cultural wake-up call. It challenges assumptions about fame, reminds audiences of the humanity behind performance, and forces an uncomfortable but necessary conversation about what and who gets sacrificed in the pursuit of mass entertainment. The world knew Curly as a bringer of joy, a master of physical comedy whose energy seemed boundless. Now the world also knows the cost of that illusion, and it is both humbling and heartbreaking. Curly's mystery may finally be solved, but what it reveals is far from settled. His legacy, once viewed purely through the lens of laughter, now holds a richer, more somber dimension. It compels a re-evaluation of similar figures whose suffering may have been overlooked, and it opens the door to healing and honoring not just the performer, but the man behind the curtain. Curly Howard gave everything he had for the sake of making people laugh. Now, at long last, the truth gives him something back: dignity, understanding. and the recognition of what he endured beneath the surface of that infectious grin. The solving of the Curly Howard mystery doesn't just close a chapter in entertainment history, it sends ripples into how the modern world views the intersection of art, industry, and the individuals caught in between. While the headlines will focus on the dramatic unveiling, the hidden medical files, the studio negligence, the covert pharmacological interference, the deeper implications stretch far beyond Curly's own tragic arc. What emerges from the newly discovered truth is not only a clearer image of one man's suffering, but a dissection of a broader systemic issue: the dehumanization of performers under the crushing weight of commercial expectation. Curly was not an anomaly. He was a product of a system where physical resilience was not only expected, but demanded, and where comedic brilliance was viewed as an endlessly renewable resource. In learning the truth about his breakdown, the framework of early Hollywood itself is laid bare. Studios in the 1930s and 40s wielded unparalleled control over their actors, who were considered investments, not collaborators. Actors signed rigid contracts, were denied autonomy over their health and schedules, and were routinely kept in the dark about the nature of treatments or remedies administered to keep them working. The specific case of Curly's medication is now raising uncomfortable questions in academic circles about how widespread such practices might have been. The culture of pep pills, amphetamines, and unnamed injectables was rampant in studio lots, particularly when filming was intense and budgets ballooned. For comedians who operated under additional pressure to deliver spontaneous energy and manic timing, the reliance on such substances was even more dangerous. Curly's revelations may in fact be the tip of an iceberg involving an entire era's worth of stars whose ailments and declines were misattributed or even deliberately misrepresented. That revelation leads to another layer of introspection: complicity by silence. While studios certainly orchestrated the treatment and concealment of Curly's condition, there were others on set, directors, makeup artists, camera crews, who witnessed his deterioration in real time. The documents recently uncovered show that people around him were not unaware. Some raised concerns, as noted in memos, but most kept quiet. Whether it was fear of reprisal, professional loyalty, or a culture so desensitized to pain it didn't recognize abuse, the silence became part of the machinery that ground Curly down. That silence echoes today, demanding scrutiny not only of past inaction but of how workplace suffering is responded to in present-day entertainment environments. There is also the peculiar, piercing irony that Curly Howard, whose comedic identity was built around exaggerated physical vulnerability, was enduring real and mounting injury while performing acts of artificial helplessness. He embodied the bumbling fool who got smacked, kicked, tripped, and electrocuted, always bouncing back up for another laugh. In the fictional realm of slapstick, pain was a gag. In reality, it became an accumulating injury that stripped away his speech, his coordination, and finally his place in the spotlight. The parallel between Curly's on-screen persona and his off-screen deterioration is disturbing, and yet it also brings into sharp focus the dangerous alchemy of art and suffering. Digging deeper, there is something symbolic in the timing of Curly's decline. His health began to visibly falter just as World War II was ending, and the entertainment industry was about to undergo significant transformation. Television was looming on the horizon. Audiences were becoming more sophisticated, demanding new formats and broader narratives. The slapstick era, once dominant, was beginning its slow fade. Curly, in his physicality and absurdity, was the pinnacle of a style that was losing relevance. In some ways, his body was bearing not just the scars of his own overexertion, but of a form of comedy being pushed toward obsolescence. That realization adds another tragic dimension: the idea that his collapse mirrored the waning of the very genre he helped define. As new evidence continues to emerge, historians are also re-evaluating the roles of Moe and Larry in Curly's decline. It's long been assumed that the trio operated as a tight-knit unit, loyal through the ups and downs. However, correspondence and testimonies suggest that internal dynamics became strained as Curly's reliability waned. Moe, who took on an increasing amount of behind-the-scenes decision-making, is now seen as having walked a fine line between pragmatism and detachment. Letters attributed to Moe suggest a growing frustration with Curly's unpredictability, though they stop short of showing direct cruelty. Still, the absence of meaningful intervention from within the group remains a difficult legacy to unpack. The unveiling of the full truth has also sparked a renewed debate among preservationists and curators about how to handle and contextualize older films. Should the newly uncovered circumstances surrounding Curly's performances affect the way his work is archived or presented? Some argue for added disclaimers or educational notes in future releases of his films, highlighting what was happening off-screen during those productions. Others contend that such measures risk dampening the joy of the performances themselves. It's a delicate balance, honoring the craft while acknowledging the cost. Equally complex is the question of public perception. For years, Curly's story was simplified, often reduced to a morality tale of fame and self-destruction, with vague allusions to poor health or bad habits. This newly established clarity forces audiences to reckon with the role myth-making plays in distorting real people into caricatures. Curly was not a cautionary tale about celebrity excess. He was not the fallen clown whose hubris led him to ruin. He was a man who was used, ignored, and ultimately discarded by a system that refused to see the warning signs. Now, audiences have to ask themselves how much they really want to know about the people who make them laugh. There is comfort in illusion, in separating the performance from the performer. Yet the truth about Curly's final years bridges that divide in ways that can't be easily walked back. Fans may still enjoy the iconic routines, the oyster soup bit, the floor polish gag, the spinning dance of joy, but they may now watch them through a different lens. And perhaps that's not a bad thing. Perhaps it makes the laughter deeper, more layered, a shared acknowledgement of the sacrifice behind the silliness. On the academic side, the findings have led to a flurry of interest in revisiting the biographies of other performers from the same era. If Curly's struggles were misinterpreted for decades, how many other silent suffering stars have been mischaracterized by history? Already, researchers are revisiting medical reports and personnel records related to other slapstick performers, Shemp Howard, Buster Keaton, even lesser-known vaudeville circuit acts, to identify patterns of neglect or misdiagnosis. The ripple effects of the Curly discovery are reshaping the landscape of performance history in real time. This growing awareness has also sparked a wave of tributes. Tributes not just in honor of Curly's work, but in honor of his endurance. Artists, comedians, and actors have begun dedicating performances to his memory, calling attention to the pressures that still linger in the entertainment world. His story has become emblematic, not just of a moment in time, but of a structural imbalance that has yet to be fully corrected. There's also a new wave of interest in memorializing Curly's legacy properly. Museums and cultural institutions are collaborating on exhibits that not only celebrate his comedic talent, but also tell the truth of his life behind the laughter. Proposals are underway for traveling displays and even a potential feature-length documentary that lays out the full timeline of events in vivid, painful detail. The goal is no longer just to honor his comedy, but to ensure that his suffering, and the industry's role in it, is not forgotten. What stands out most in the wake of this revelation is how much Curly Howard's story matters today. In an age where transparency is increasingly demanded, where the rights and protections of workers, particularly those in the public eye, are under scrutiny, his case offers a historical anchor. It reminds the world that behind every image of joy there may be a silent cost. And while that truth doesn't erase the happiness he brought, it does demand a reckoning with how that happiness was extracted. His legacy, once seen in the simplicity of a silly voice and a spinning fall, has deepened. It now includes the weight of resilience, the gravity of neglect, and the power of posthumous truth. Curly didn't just make people laugh, he now makes people think about pain, about care, about the thin line between performance and personhood. The unraveling of Curly Howard's hidden struggles also calls attention to the evolving ethics of documentary storytelling and biographical research. As new tools allow historians to reconstruct personal histories with unprecedented precision, the line between preserving dignity and exposing suffering becomes ever more sensitive. Curly's case demonstrates the value of revealing uncomfortable truths, not for sensationalism, but for justice, for restoration, and for recalibrating public memory. It sets a precedent for investigative efforts into the lives of other performers whose stories have been clouded by myth or sanitized for mainstream consumption. Moreover, the discussion extends into the realms of medical history and ethics. The forced administration of unregulated substances, once shrugged off as an industry norm, now fits clearly within the framework of medical abuse. Scholars and physicians alike are taking note, exploring how historical health violations in high-pressure professions inform current practices. There's growing momentum to establish formal acknowledgments from institutions once complicit in such abuses, with discussions of memorial scholarships and education campaigns gaining traction. Curley's newly uncovered narrative not only reshapes the past, but catalyzes change in the present, offering a blueprint for recognizing and redressing institutional failures, one rooted in respect, accountability, and an enduring commitment to truth. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us. What are your thoughts on Curly Howard's mystery? What do you expect happened? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.